Hello and welcome to the online cannabis permitting workshop forum. Thank you for joining us today, and without further ado, we will get started.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Kevin Ponce. I'm a senior environmental scientist with the California Department of Food and Agriculture's CalCannabis licensing unit. And the presentation I'm going to be giving today is just going to include some brief metrics on licensing numbers and a broad level overview of the licensing procedure. The graphic that you're looking at now has a basic breakdown of number of licenses per county. And as you can see, Humboldt County and Santa Barbara are up at the top, and then the rest of the counties kind of fall off. This is just a graphic of the general size of the licenses that have been issued. And as you can see from this, the vast majority is the small license. Then we have issued by type. And as you can see, the outdoor is the largest license type that has been issued by CalCannabis. And then we have mixed light tier 1. I'm sorry. Mixed light tier 1 is the largest, and after that we have outdoor. This is just a breakdown of adult use versus medicinal, 66 to 34. And what this is showing is traditional agriculture, traditional ag land compared to cannabis cultivation. And as you can see, traditionally ag land is concentrated in the Central Valley, a little bit down south, and cannabis tends to be on the coast. At CalCannabis, there's 3 units: the licensing, compliance and enforcement, and the administrative branch. I am a scientist for the licensing branch. What we do is we review and approve licenses. We look for environmental compliance, and we look for compliance through permits through the other regulatory agencies that are involved with cannabis cultivation. What happens when you submit an application? It goes right to our local verification unit, who sends an email out to the local authority checking for compliance. That process can take up to 60 days if the local jurisdiction is not responsive. If we have not heard from them in 60 days, we assume that there is local compliance and we move forward with processing the license. Hopefully your local jurisdiction responds back right away, and that would reduce any sort of holdups on our end as far as moving the application through. After local verification, it goes to the admin review unit, then it passes through to the scientific review unit, and at the end of all that, the license is approved and issued. Some of the other checks that are happening in local verification, they confirm the physical address, where the premises is. They send the compliance inquiry to the local jurisdiction, and then they analyze the response as it comes back. After the local verification unit, it moves on to the admin review unit, where they look for business entity structure, the right to occupy, and owner applications. This is the first of 2 deficiency checks. So if any information that has been provided for the admin review is not adequate, we will send an email requesting further information. You have 90 days to respond and supply that missing information, or your application will be disqualified and you'll have to start all over again. So it's very important that applicants are monitoring their emails and being responsive to anything that you receive. And if there are any questions, I recommend just reaching out preemptively. If you have your app that's been sitting there for several months and you haven't heard anything, just give us a phone call and we'll let you know what the status is. But like I said, this portion here is the first of 2 deficiency periods. So after you respond in that 90-day period and everything's fine, it moves out of admin review and moves to scientific review. What we do there is we're looking for California Environmental Quality Act compliance. We're reviewing your cultivation plan, which consists of the pest management plan, the waste management plan, premises and property diagrams. And this is the second deficiency period. So if there's anything missing at this point, we will send out another system generated email requesting more information, and you have an additional 90-day period to get back to us. This is separate from the admin deficiency period. So in essence, you have 2 90-day periods to get anything back to us. I recommend, again, being very responsive, because the longer it takes for applicants to respond, the longer your app is waiting for us to review it. Some of the other things we're looking for is enrollment in the State Water Quality Protection Program and Lake or Streambed Alteration Agreement through Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we're looking for water source and associated documentation. It's at this point that a decision is made regarding whether or not the applicant receives an annual or provisional license. So a provisional license, you must be able to show that CEQA compliance is underway. And that could be, you know, local verification that you're engaged in the process through an email or a list or a local permit. But the main point of this is there is only one application for a commercial cannabis license, and the California Department of Food and Agriculture determines, once we review that application, whether or not the applicant qualifies for either an annual or provisional, and it's based entirely on your level of CEQA compliance. Some new additions to the licensing program is the ability to amend an existing license. And through that, you would submit an amendment to California Department of Food and Agriculture's CalCannabis. And this is for things such as physical modifications, owner information changes, owner changes, designated responsible party declaration. We will also be using the licensing amendment procedure for transitioning of a provisional license and for transition of a provisional license to an annual license and renewal of a provisional license. So what we would like to see is, if a provisional license is coming up ready for renewal, you know, you're able to renew 60 days prior to it expiring. We would like to see applicants providing an amendment to California Department of Food and Agriculture addressing any outstanding deficiencies with their current provisional license. So a lot of times applicants can receive a provisional license, but they may or may not still be missing some components. In order to renew a provisional license or transition to an annual, you will have to have had addressed those outstanding deficiencies. And that can be done through the licensing amendment process, preferably well before your time for renewal has come up. We will be handing out a lot more information on this process, so stay tuned. You should be receiving specific emails that will detail this process and what it is that you need to provide to CalCannabis in order for you to either transition or renew. I'm just going to touch real quickly on California, on the cannabis track and trace system. Annual cultivators are required to report the disposition of immature and mature plants, non-manufactured products, transfers, and waste. This is all done with the use of an encrypted radio frequency unique identifier, which is provided at no additional cost to the applicant. It's part of your licensing fees. But you, as a licensee, once you are approved You must be diligent about being signed up into the track and trace system and receiving your tags in a timely manner. Temporary licensees did not have to use the track and trace, well, they weren't able to use the track and trace system. All provisionals and annual licenses will need to use the system. This is just a note that the required training must be completed before access to the system will be provided. Just be diligent about signing up and getting your tags. And here's contact information. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to give us a call or go to our email or go to our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Kyle Stoner. I am a senior environmental scientist specialist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in our north central region out of Rancho Cordova. And I'll be presenting today on cannabis cultivation permitting for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So the department's mission is to manage California's diverse fish, wildlife, and plant resources and the habitats upon which they depend for the ecological values and for their use and enjoyment by the public. And so one of the regulatory tools that the department uses to achieve this mission is the specific Fish and Game Code section 1602. I think I'm missing a slide here somewhere. So the Lake and Streambed Alteration program states that any entity must notify CDFW before beginning any activity that may substantially divert or obstruct the natural flow of any river, stream, or lake, substantially change or use any material from the bed, channel, or bank of any river, stream, or lake, or deposit debris, waste, or other materials containing crumbled, flaked, or ground pavement where it may pass into any river, lake, or stream. And so this requirement applies to all activities in all rivers, lakes, or streams in the state of California. And so there's no definition, but any river, lake, or stream would include perennial streams which flow year-round, ephemeral streams which flow seasonally and are dry for a period of time, and episodic streams that flow in response to precipitation events and are dry for periods of time. The reason that I'm focusing specifically on this code section is that the California Department of Food and Ag annual license application requirement states that all CDFA applicants must include a final lake or stream bed alteration agreement or written verification that an LSA agreement is not required. And so to hammer that home, it's that all cannabis cultivators in the state of California that want to become permitted through CalCannabis will be required to notify the Department of Fish and Wildlife regardless of the location and types of activities that you're conducting. So this would apply to all cultivators. And so once we get past the idea that you're going to have to notify regardless of your location, we'll move into when is an LSA agreement required. So you've already notified, you've submitted a notification of lake or stream bed alteration. And so the department receives those notifications and are assigned to scientific review, and CDFW will review those notifications and determine if the activity proposed may substantially adversely affect existing fish or wildlife resources that occur within a river, lake, or stream. So if your activity does include an activity that substantially adversely affects existing fish and wildlife resources, then the department would prepare an agreement, which is a permit, to authorize those activities to occur. Example activities that may require an agreement would include water diversions or impoundments, stream crossings, improvements of bridges and culverts, even if the culvert exists. If you need to improve it, for example, fire access for a cultivation site, then that would require an agreement. Bank stabilization or armoring, any sort of modifications to a channel or lake bed, riparian vegetation management or removal, or any other sort of in-channel maintenance. It's important to note that these activities may or may not be directly related to your cannabis cultivation activities. They can be kind of ancillary in the sense where if you need to provide additional access to your site and that access road is used directly for cannabis cultivation, it would be considered part of the overall cannabis cultivation site and would require a notification and an agreement. So how do you get an LSA agreement or verification when one is not required? The first step that we recommend is that potential applicants visit our website shown here at wildlife.ca.gov/conservation/cannabis. Actually, you don't need to use the conservation. It can just be /cannabis, I believe. And as you can see here, we've got multiple links to information regarding permitting, information about environment and how cannabis cultivation might impact the environment, restoration of previously impacted sites, a tab for enforcement, and then additional resources. You can find information about upcoming events or specific news related to cannabis cultivation and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then you're going to want to navigate to this cannabis cultivation permitting page, which has a lot of very specific information about permitting. And you can see there's a link on the right side of the screen there that says EPIM's online permitting portal. So once you've educated yourself on sort of the different permitting pathways and just general information about cannabis cultivation and permitting, you'll want to click on that EPIM's online permitting portal. And that'll take you to our online permitting system, EPIMS. And so the first step will be to register as an EPIMS user. You'll complete the registration form, and then you'll need to allow up to 72 hours for your registration to be reviewed and approved by staff in-house. And so if you're doing this on a Friday evening, I wouldn't expect to get anything back till at least Monday, because they do have to go manually through the system and be approved by staff. So a note here, be sure that the applicant that will be applying for a CDFA license does need to be the registered EPIMS user. Even if the account is being set up by a consultant, it's important to use the applicant's name because all correspondence from the system will be addressed specifically to that person, and CDFA is going to want to see those names match. Once you've been approved in EPIMS, there are 3 pathways to compliance, and we'll go through all 3 of them here. First pathway is the self-certification. This is a specific pathway for sites that are indoor, on concrete foundations or impermeable foundations with permanent roofs, typically on municipal water sources and municipal sewers. And this is just a fast track for those kind of no-brainer situations where you're not going to be impacting rivers, lakes, or streams. You're going to need to provide specific property location and project description, water source, project maps. We'll answer some specific questions related to infrastructure and whether the site is constructed or not. Again, your water source. Once you submit a self-certification, that self-certification will be assigned to a scientist for review just to confirm that the system has done its job and made sure that you are eligible. If your project qualifies, then you'll receive notification or a written verification that an LSA agreement is not needed, and that'll come through the EPIM system. If your project does not qualify, then you'll get notification that you are not eligible for the self-cert, and you'll have to go back and start from the beginning through a different permitting pathway. So again, it's important to visit our website prior to submitting a self-certification and make sure that you are eligible, so you don't spin your wheels on this. No fee is required. This is the error that EPIMS shows when you are not eligible. It looks like kind of a system error, but it's just the way that the system provides notification to an applicant that you're not eligible and that you need to go back and submit a different or select a different opportunity and go through a different permitting pathway. Again, a quick tip, if you just try and manipulate your answers to the questions to fit through the self-cert and then we determine in our review that you're not eligible, you're just going to be spinning your wheels. So if the system kicks you out, it's better to just kind of go back out and start a different permitting pathway. Another permitting pathway is the general agreement. This is a pre-written agreement that lives in our regulations that is exempt from CEQA. It's only for stream crossings, bridge, culverts, or rock fours, or water diversions on non-fin fish bearing streams or lakes. It has a term of 5 years, and you must comply with the terms and conditions of the permit prior to application for the permit. So the catch is that you have to already have a robust project location description and water source description. You have to have a biological resource assessment produced by a qualified professional, as well as design plans, if applicable, designed by a professional engineer or other qualified professional, and a detailed property diagram. The most common pathway for compliance is going to be the standard agreement or standard notification. If your project gets to the point where you need a permit, which is the agreement, your permit will be based on specific project conditions, project details, and site-specific conditions. The applicant will work directly with CDFW to avoid or minimize project impacts, whether that be through changes to the project description or requiring specific avoidance and minimization measures. The notification is going to require a robust project location, project description, just a description of your water source, detailed maps. During our review, CDFW may require additional detailed information. We may request a site visit. If we do issue a standard agreement, then the department must comply with CEQA at the time of issuance of that final agreement. And there is a fee, and they vary by the cost of your project. So when you're completing the notification form, you'll state the cost of your project, and then the fee schedule is online, and you'll determine your specific project fee at that point. Some tips on how to avoid common delays include allowing sufficient time. So it's important to note that the department has a 90-day statutory timeline from the date that we receive a complete notification, including fees, to provide then a draft agreement for applicant review. So plan for that 90 days. It can be shorter, and it can also be longer. If the department determines that your application is incomplete, then that statutory timeline stops until we receive additional sufficient information. So to avoid delays, plan for that time. If questions come up, work directly with regional office staff serving your project area. Again, make sure that you're starting with the correct permitting pathway so you don't kind of waste time on a permit pathway that doesn't apply to your project. Important, identify all activities associated with your cultivation project. This would include activities not taking place within a river, lake, or stream. We're looking for everything from how you're accessing your site to how you're cultivating, where you're cultivating, and where you're getting your water. Again, I mentioned this earlier, if you're working with a consultant, make sure you have access to your online account and that that account is made in your name. Submit correct fees. A notification will not be assigned for scientific review until the correct fees have even been received. So again, if you're having trouble understanding or if you can't figure out what the correct fee is, please give us a call and we'll help you get through that. We want to get folks through the system as efficiently as possible. Remediation fees may be required if your site had previously been subject to Fish and Game Code violations, or if you're remediating a previous impacted area. The department has to comply with CEQA every time we issue a permit, and all cultivation sites have to comply with CEQA before they can get their annual license from CDFA as well. So if we issue a permit, we will need to comply with CEQA at that point. Just something to think about as you're getting ready to notify. If your CEQA is pending, then we may just kind of hit a point where you have a draft permit in hand, but we cannot execute it until CEQA has been completed. Something else to think about, if your cultivation activities may result in the take of a threatened, endangered, or candidate species, a separate CEQA permit may be required. Take, as defined in Fish and Game Code, is catch, capture, kill, pursue, hunt, or attempt to do any of those things. So hopefully as part of your CEQA analysis, there is a biological resource assessment conducted that addresses this potential issue. Here's a list of a whole bunch of other Fish and Game Code sections that may apply to your project. They're not specific to cannabis. These apply to all activities in the state. I'm not going to go through each one, but it's just to illustrate that there's a whole lot of other code sections that apply to activities in the state of California. quick slide on fines and penalties. There are some substantial monetary fines that can be assessed for violations of the Fish and Game Code related to cannabis cultivation. So we just encourage folks to start their permit process, at least reach out to us and ask any specific questions you have. We want to help you protect your investment and also protect California's fish and wildlife resources. Our job is to help you get through the system efficiently. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Here's additional information for all of our regional offices. You can find a map of all of our regional boundaries on our website. So depending on where you are, you will be permitting through the specific region that your project lies in. I think that's it, so we can take any questions.
Okay, thank you. So now, next up, we're going to have State Water Resources Control Board.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you again for joining us today. My name is Mike.
And my name is Jonathan Pham.
And we are going to be presenting the role of the State Water Resources Control Board, or State Water Board, in the cannabis cultivation permitting process. And I just want to let you know that about halfway through this presentation from the Water Board, we will switch gears from the water quality portion of what we work with for cannabis cultivation permitting to the water rights portion, just so you're aware. So we're going to start with going over the State Water Board's cannabis cultivation program and the structure of the program, as well as the structure of the State Water Board's organization itself. Then I will present a little bit about the cannabis policy and the cannabis cultivation general order, which is the permit required for your water quality protection. Jonathan will then present on the small irrigation use registration, or SWR, which is the cannabis cultivation water right. And we will present the application process through our application portal, and then leave you with some contact information in case you have questions after today. So the State Water Board the headquarters are located in Sacramento, which is where the Division of Water Quality, Division of Water Rights, and Office of Enforcement are located. There are also 9 regional water quality control boards who the Division of Water Quality works closely with in reviewing your water quality permits, and they have offices throughout the state. The cannabis cultivation program is broken up into 3 primary components, the first of which is the foundation of the Water Board's cannabis policy, aptly named the Cannabis Policy, or nicknamed the Cannabis Policy. And the Cannabis Cultivation General Order is the primary avenue for water quality permitting. And the Cannabis SIUR is your streamlined cannabis cultivation water right permit. So the Business and Professions Code set the mandate for the State Water Board to protect springs, wetlands, and aquatic habitat from impacts of cannabis cultivation. The Water Board may in the future also include requirements for groundwater extractions toward this goal of protecting water. The Cannabis Policy describes the overall structure of the Water Board's regulatory program, and it establishes water quality and in-stream flow requirements. And this document is going to be updated as necessary and has been updated once already. As for the cannabis policy document itself, it lays out in the main part of the document an overview of how the Water Board's program fits in with the other regulatory programs throughout the state. And we describe how our policy is enforced through a progressive enforcement system. You'll see attachment A is at the back end of the cannabis policy, and this includes a lot of good information and specifics. So section 1 has definitions, general requirements, and prohibitions for cannabis cultivators. Section 2 has requirements for water diversion and waste discharge. Section 3 and 4 have to do with your water right, flow requirements and compliance gauging. Section 5 has information about planning and reporting, so the documents you'll be reporting to us. And Section 6 has some useful guidance documents for your reference. This visual shows the cannabis policy is implemented by the State Water Board and shows the dual mandate of protecting water quality on the side that has the General Order Waste Discharge Regulatory Program, and on water rights, which has the Small Irrigation Use Registration Program on the right side of the slide. And again, you can note that the General Order is implemented by the regional boards and the State Water Board together. And you'll see the Department of Food and Agriculture's CalCannabis cultivation licensing. Both of these permits from the Water Board are required by CalCannabis to get your permit from them. And before we go any further, it's important for us to recognize why we have this program to protect from impacts of cannabis cultivation to begin with. And in the upper left hand, moving clockwise throughout this slide, you'll see illegal grading activities have taken place historically. You often see chemicals like fertilizers, pesticides, and fuels stored improperly on cultivation sites. You'll have unpermitted water use that does not have a water right associated with it. Sometimes you'll have destruction of native vegetation for the purpose of clearing out land for cannabis cultivation. And in the lower left-hand part of the slide, you'll see that there's some turbid water and relatively clean water mixing together. And that is what we are trying to prevent, is degraded water quality from cannabis cultivation. On this slide, I just wanted to emphasize again that the General Order is implemented in conjunction with the regional water boards, and that this permit is required for the CDFA CalCannabis license. And you might hear this General Order permit referred to as a water quality permit or water quality protection program by other agencies. This map shows the boundaries for the regional cannabis units across the state. And although there are 9 regional water boards, some of these cannabis units incorporate more than one region, such as the South Coast and the Eastern California cannabis units. And some of the regions do have multiple offices within them. And more information about the regional board contact is included at the end of this presentation. The regional cannabis units help with outreach and messaging, both for the water boards and along with other regulatory agencies. They're the ones who actually review and issue your waste discharge permits. They determine compliance with requirements as they review your applications and technical documents. They initiate enforcement actions as needed, and they can also provide technical assistance. The distribution of permits throughout the state looks similar to the CalCannabis distribution of permits we saw earlier. So on the left side, the water quality permits are generally distributed along the coast, and the green dots indicate outdoor sites, while the yellow dots indicate indoor sites. And indoor sites are generally concentrated in urban areas or in places that aren't as conducive to outdoor cannabis cultivation. On the right side of the slide, you have the water rights permit distribution, which is mostly located in the north coast of California, where surface water is diverted for outdoor cultivation. The framework for coverage under the Cannabis Cultivation General Order is broken out into 2 parts, the first of which is the tier shown on this slide and is based on total disturbed area. And the second is the risk category, which is on the next slide. Tier 1 covers cultivation sites with disturbed area equal to or greater than 2,000 square feet and less than 1 acre or 43,560 square feet. The Tier 2 permits cover sites with disturbed area greater than or equal to 1 acre. And disturbed area includes areas that are disturbed for all activities associated with developing or modifying land for cannabis cultivation related activities or access. And this includes things like the area where you're actually cultivating, the walkways around that area, places where water is stored, where fuel is stored, and the disturbed area is always greater than the cultivation area. And you will get an error on your application if you do not obey that. So please make sure your disturbed area is reported as larger than or equal to your cultivation area. And you'll see there's an asterisk on that access point in the disturbed area definition. So roads that are constructed and maintained consistent with the Handbook for Forest, Ranch, and Rural Roads, or the Roads Handbook as it is more commonly known, are not considered disturbed area. And this is included in our regulations because roads can be a large source of sediment discharge, both from chronic discharge or if there's a failure of something like a stream crossing, which can cause a catastrophic level of sediment to be released. And the risk determination facet of our coverage structure are based on the slope. So low risk sites have no portion of the disturbed area located on a slope greater than 30%, and moderate risk sites have any portion of the disturbed area located on a slope between 30% and 50%. The low risk and moderate risk categories both comply with the riparian setback requirements. The high risk category is for sites that have any portion of the disturbed area located within the riparian setback requirement. And this designation is meant to be temporary until your facility can move the land disturbance away from the riparian setback. And the riparian setback is based on the distance from the water course and what kind of water course that is. And again, you'll need to keep your disturbed area, including petroleum pumps, off-stream water storage, and those types of things away from these water courses by the distance in this table. So generally speaking, the Class 1 water courses have fish. Class 2 water courses provide aquatic habitat for non-fish aquatic species, and Class 3 water courses do not support riparian vegetation or aquatic life. Perennial water courses flow all year or nearly all year. Ephemeral water courses flow in response to precipitation events, usually just a few months or less, and intermittent water courses flow for several months out of the year. The Class 4 man-made water courses include a setback requirement if they support native aquatic species or vegetation. And please refer to Cannabis Policy Attachment A for more details about these definitions. And another note, the regional water board's executive officers may require additional riparian setbacks or other requirements if it is determined that these are not protective of discharges to water quality. And the riparian setback, since you'll be interested in knowing on your site if you are outside of this, this is measured along the ground surface. So you can just take a tape measure, and the edge of the water course is defined as the area where the bank full stage, or where high water levels are every couple of years reaching, or from the top edge of the incised channel that holds the water course, whichever is more conservative. And for a spring, this buffer is measured in all directions for a circular buffer. Some facilities are eligible for a conditional waiver of waste discharge requirements, and you still need to follow the application process through the application portal that we will describe later. So for the indoor conditional waiver, you'll need to have a permanent roof and a relatively impermeable floor, which is usually asphalt or concrete. And just a note, this does not include hoop houses with dirt floors. You'll need to discharge your wastewater to a sewer or capture your wastewater and transport it to a permitted treatment system. If you are trying to discharge to an on-site treatment system or to land, this is not covered by the indoor conditional waiver. You will need to get separate authorization for that. And you'll also need to comply with the requirements of Attachment A and get a water right, if that applies to you. The outdoor conditional waiver is for outdoor sites with less than 2,000 square feet of disturbed area, all located contiguously or in one spot. There's a more restrictive slope requirement of 20% than for the low risk category you saw earlier. And you also need to comply with the riparian setbacks and Attachment A requirements. And the application portal will walk you through and help you determine which waiver, if any, your site will be eligible for. As for the fees range from $600 to $8,000 depending on your cultivation or disturbed area and risk category. So higher tier is associated with higher fees, and a higher risk category is associated with higher fees. If you get a conditional waiver, you will be paying lower fees. And the reasoning for this is that higher risk sites and larger sites require more regulatory oversight, and we need to pay for that staff time. When you apply on the portal, you'll obtain a notice of receipt through your email, and that will have more information about how to pay your fee and site-specific information. A full fee schedule is available on the Water Board's cannabis cultivation website. So you can go to waterboards.ca.gov/cannabis and find a lot of helpful information, including FAQs and the policy and documents that you'll be interested in. And now I will pass it off to my colleague, Jonathan, for the water rights portion.
Hello, this is Jonathan Pham, environmental scientist with the Division of Water Rights, and I'll be going over the water rights portion of the presentation. So the first question you may have is, do you need a water right? If you are commercially cultivating cannabis with surface water, you'll need a water right. That can either be in the form of a cannabis small irrigation use registration, also known as an SIUR, or another valid water right. The SIUR water right only applies to surface water diversions. That means rivers, creeks, springs that flow off your property. Other valid water rights refers to pre-1914 rights or other appropriate water rights. The key feature is that they must have irrigation listed as a use, and it also allows for storage. That other valid water right must have enough storage to satisfy the cannabis irrigation needs during the forbearance period, which is April 1st to October 31st. In the middle of this diagram, we have fully contained springs. A fully contained spring is one that does not flow off your property. A fully contained spring that is verified by the State Water Board is exempt from the SIUR program. Still, those using a fully contained spring for their cannabis cultivation must still apply through the SIUR portal and obtain a certified SIUR. That will permit their diversion while the report prepared by a qualified professional is reviewed. I'll touch more upon this in the next few slides. On the right, we have exempt sources. They are not within the permitting authority of the Division of Water Rights, but you will still need to register through the application portal to obtain your notice of receipt. This notice of receipt, sometimes referred to as an NOR, is to be submitted to CDFA in place of a water right to obtain your CalCannabis license. These sources include groundwater wells, water purveyors who should have their own water right, and rain catchment ponds. So to explain a little bit more on the fully contained springs, if you go to the Water Board's cannabis page, there's a link to the fully contained springs info page, and it should look like this. In order to get the exemption, one must obtain a certified SIUR and submit a fully contained springs report prepared by a qualified professional. That could be a licensed professional geologist, hydrogeologist, engineering geologist, or hydrologist. Fully contained springs exemptions will allow the cultivator to divert from the spring throughout the forbearance period. DWR, Division of Water Rights staff member, will review the report and provide a determination on the fully contained spring based on the validity and completeness of the report. A submitted report does not guarantee an exemption. If the report is sufficient, the cultivator can revoke their SIUR water right and avoid annual fees, reporting, and the forbearance period. If the report is deemed insufficient, however, the cannabis SIUR remains certified, but for a spring diversion that does leave the property. It must also comply with the renewals, reporting, and forbearance similar to a stream diversion. So next, you might ask what type of water right you may need. The SIUR is for commercial cannabis cultivation involving sale, trade, or barter. Other valid water rights may be used, once again, if it lists irrigation as a use and has sufficient storage throughout the forbearance period. If you're cultivating 6 plants or less, and in addition to your domestic consumptive water uses, you can cover that with a small domestic use registration, also known as an SDU. For the SIUR, it must comply with the general conditions, CDFW conditions, and the cannabis policy conditions. The maximum diversion amount is 6.6 acre-feet per year. The maximum instantaneous diversion rate is 10 gallons per minute. If you were to divert 10 gallons per minute for the entirety of the diversion season, which is November 1st to March 31st, you will get 6.6 acre-feet. The fees for the SIUR is $750 for initial registration fee, and the recurring fee is the same amount, $750. This allows diversion to storage during the wet season, which is November 1st to March 31st, and imposes a forbearance period, a time where no diversions can occur from April 1st to October 31st. And that's possibly longer depending on the particular year's flows. On the Water Rights Cannabis page, we have a link to our cannabis compliance gauge mapping tool. You can use this tool and your point of diversion location. With that, you can verify if it's permissible to divert on any given day during the diversion season. There are some limitations to the SIUR program. We cannot permit any diversions that are on fully appropriated streams where no more water can be allocated, wild and scenic rivers, which can be state and or federally protected, and also the CDFW in-stream flow area. We cannot issue SIUR water rights in these cases. Next, we have on-stream ponds. On-stream ponds or reservoirs are considered on-stream if they collect some concentrated or channelized surface flow. They can be certified with an SIUR if the reservoir existed prior to October 1st, 2016, or if it is in the North Coast in-stream flow policy area under AB 2121, the reservoir must exist prior to July 19th, 2006 on a Class 1 or 2 stream, or October 1st, 2016 on a Class 3 stream. Additionally, the State Water Board and CDFW will make a joint determination on the reservoir based on the logic that decommissioning could be more environmentally detrimental than continued diversion into the reservoir. If the reservoir is permitted, it may still be subject to modifications to mitigate environmental damage. The fee structure for SIURs with on-stream reservoirs is as follows. It's $4,000 for the application, bringing the total to $4,750 for your total initial application, and is a $250 annual fee, bringing your annual recurring fee to $1,000 for the SIUR with an on-stream pond. Now I'd like to introduce the Cannabis Cultivation Program portal. This is how you'd apply for the Division of Water Quality General Order enrollment, and also the Division of Water Rights SIUR water rights. On the State Water Board's Cannabis webpage, there's a link to the Cultivation application portal. It can also be accessed through the link shown on the screen. New users must create an account using an email address. Next is a slide outlining the process. Once you have created an account, you'll answer the water quality and water rights questions regarding your operations to the best of your ability. Once submitted, you'll receive 2 notices of receipt, one for the general order and one for the SIUR water right. These notices of receipt will inform you of your specific fees. Once we receive your fee, The staff from Division of Water Quality will review your general order application, and staff from Water Rights will review your SIUR application. If there are any inconsistencies or deficiencies associated with your application, a member of our technical staff will reach out to you via email. So it is beneficial to be vigilant on your email accounts. If everything checks out, you'll receive your notice of applicability and or your SIUR water right. So one important thing to note is that you can register for your water right and or your general order enrollment today. State Water Board cannabis permits are not contingent on any other agency or permit, so you can start. Remember, both permits are required to obtain a cannabis cultivation license from CalCannabis or CDFA. Posted is a link to our website as well as our social media handles. Next is our contact information for the Division of Water Rights and also the Division of Water Quality, specifically the cannabis units. And next we have contact information for the regional board. That has ended my presentation. Thank you for your time, and now we'll accept some questions.
We do have one more slide you get to enter that had contact information for EDD, which is the Employment Development Department. They wanted to make sure that you had their contact information. And then we've had a request of each of the presenters if you could state your name again and your titles from where you're from. So, let's start with Kevin.
Kevin Ponce, California Department of Food and Agriculture, and I'm an environmental scientist.
My name is Kyle Stoner. I am with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, North Central Region, and my title is Senior Environmental Scientist Specialist.
My name is Mike Rubens. I work with the State Water Resources Control Board in the Division of Water Quality Cannabis Regulatory Unit, and I am a water resource control engineer.
My name is Jonathan Pham. I'm also with the State Water Resources Control Board. I'm with the Division of Water Rights, Cannabis Registration Unit, environmental scientist.
And if you have any more questions that come up in the meantime, please contact us. You've got all the contact information for the three presentations. And you can also send any questions to askcannabis@wildlife.ca.gov, and we will funnel those to the appropriate agency if you're not sure who to contact.
And one other thing, if you're a member of the media and you have additional questions, please contact Information Officer Janice Mackey at 916-207-7891, and I'd be happy to answer your questions or give you any information or direct you to the appropriate agency for to answer your question.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for attending.